Okay, I guess we get started here. I'll introduce myself and the company. Uh, Appreciate everybody for coming. We're going to cover today using virtual reality in your interior design business. I spearhead the business development sales team at Yulio. Have a strong background in CAD, 3D CAD tools and CAD file formats, and also technology. You see my lovely kids here. This was back in a seems like in a previous a lifetime ago. We just went to a trip to California in October. But yeah, it just seems like a long time ago. I'm sure others have a similar kind of feel, especially with this crazy COVID going on. But I'm always happy to, especially during this time, to help people. I take calls after hours, weekends. Feel free to reach out. There's my email and my phone number. I'll leave this up at the very end too. More than happy to help and take questions and help us solve problems, either with our product or just generally 3D or visualization or VR. So appreciate your time. So let's get started. Today we're going to cover, under the umbrella of using VR in your design business. We're going to give a bit of an intro to that. We're going to talk about disruption and what that means. Also, we're going to get into a bit of the VR hardware. There's lots and lots of different options out there. It can be quite confusing for people that don't know. And I'll help you identify kind of the couple basic categories and break it down further from there. More than happy to do that here. And then using VR in presentations, which is really the focus of or the core feature set of Yulio. It's a tool to do remote and collaborative presentations immersively. There's lots of other applications out there. Obviously I'll be sticking with Yulio, but I'm certainly I am well versed in other applications, and there's other applications and use cases where Yulio may not be the best solution, and I'm more than happy to talk about that. Primarily, that'll be around the tethered VR solutions and pushing around polygons and dealing with parametric modeling in VR. And then at the very end, we're going to go through a live example. One of our small independently owned design business up here in Owen Sound. She was kind enough to let me use her project to show it off and show what Yulio can do and what VR can do for interior design company owners and interior designers. So what is VR? I mean, it's been around a long time. It's been the stuff of movies. It's been the stuff of science fiction books. The holodeck, everyone knows from Star Trek, or at least certain people my age anyways. Virtual reality, it's probably best to define the term. That's where we recreate a reality fully. You're fully immersed. AR is augmented reality. That's where you're overlaying graphics and information visually on the real world. So AR and VR are quite different, and they're separate disciplines, but down the road, technologists expect those to converge a bit. And then XR is really just kind of a broad, if you've seen XR anywhere, that's extended reality, and that encompasses just kind of all kinds of visual mediums. I always like to tell people, immersive and virtual reality really starts on an oversized 2D screen. It could be as simple as an oversized 2D screen. As long as you're moving around in real time and you have some agency, you're going to feel immersed, much more so than watching passively, a photo or a movie. So that's one end of the spectrum, and then all the way at the other end of the spectrum, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it in a few minutes, is fully immersive VR headsets, whether mobile or tethered. And so, obviously you have more agency, you have more immersion, it's more believable, you have a better sense of scale and shape, but you really have a bunch of that way down at the oversized 2D screen, or even just a laptop screen down at the other end. And I think it's really important to highlight that. we don't always have VR headsets to use, and so we want to make sure that we can get this immersive visualization, really on any device and anywhere is the vision. The first VR headset was actually engineered and it was going to be commercially produced in 1968. A lot of people are probably surprised by that number. It's been 50 years or so since that inception, and really just in the last few years, it's really become a consumer product viable. The initially VR was really coined as an entertainment device. That's where we see a lot of the push and a lot of the stigma. A lot of people think VR is just gaming or entertainment, and it's quite a bit more than that. And that's what we're going to get into today. I don't know if you've seen this chart before, but these guys are famous. Gartner's a famous market research for technology company. They've been around, I think, almost 50 years now. And they put out an assessment of technology every year. It's called the hype cycle, Gartner hype cycle. And really what it does is they've kind of track all these different technologies. And usually what happens when a new technology hits, there's an innovation trigger. Everybody gets excited, expectations go way up, and then you hit this sort of peak of expectations. It's fairly expensive in this category. It's just been conceived. The excitement level is high, and then the reality of well, it's too expensive. It's too hard to use. It's cumbersome. It's a lot of friction. Maybe it doesn't really work that well, only in principle. And that's when you have this trough of disillusionment. Everyone slides down the other side. So you can imagine 1968, they're over on the top of this peak and they're really excited, but it took about 45 years coming down this trough and then back up the slope of enlightenment. Then the slope of enlightenment really is when they figure out how to make the devices efficiently, how they can figure out any of the sort of friction or bad areas that don't work well, and mass production. Really, once something becomes mass production and gets widely disseminated, it comes off of this to the plateau of productivity. Now, I like to show this chart because this is 2017. The next year, virtual reality came off this chart, and now we're in 2020 and heading into 2021. So we really have VR has become an enterprise tool along with entertainment, and it's really been legitimized. Augmented reality is very, very close to being there too. Apple's coming out with their own headset, which will probably really sling it off this slope of enlightenment into plateau of productivity in next year, in 2021. That's a Gartner hype cycle, and I think everyone, one of the keys around technology and around using a technology like VR, immersive visualization, is when do you get into using the technology? Get in too early, and you're on this side, and it's expensive. Get in too late, and you're playing a bunch of catch up to others. You're spending a bunch of money and time to catch up. So really about timing. So we've just come off this Gartner hype cycle. We've just really legitimized the technology, and now it can be used efficiently. VR for designing. I mentioned before, it's very important that we separate out entertainment from productivity tools. There's similar ways that they're used. There are also similar ways that content's created. But what's great about the design community and the design industry is that we have tools. We have tools to create and build interior spaces or architectural spaces. And what we can do, what's great about that is all that energy and time and money spent building those 3D designs can then very easily be brought into VR. We're not creating those designs just for the sake of VR experiences. So that's really the kind of difference between the two sides. Entertainment, costly, time-consuming, create content. Interior design, we're already there. We're already 3/4 of the way there, if not more. because we're already working in 3D on the designs for the projects themselves for lots of reasons. The other thing that VR will do over our traditional medium, like video and stills, is have a much deeper engagement with the designs, and it really augments and expands existing workflows and design tools. And I always like to really highlight that point. Typically we're not asking for in the VR world, we're not asking for whole new ways of doing things, parallel systems or anything of that sort. We're just taking your existing tool set and we're expanding it and magnifying and augmenting its capabilities to connect your customers to your projects and your designs. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is here. And this is probably the number one thing. This has been throughout the history of design and architecture, ever since drafting tables and blueprints all the way on up. What a designer sees in 3D, they see in sort of a spatial. I'm not a designer, so I don't know what that is like in your head, but certainly, the customers. This is an age-old problem. You have a beautiful design. How do you make your customer, who's not an interior designer or architect, understand it, right? And that's really what we're getting at the core when we use VR for design presentation. There's some other things too. Obviously, if your design doesn't exist in the real world, we're able to represent that. If you're long distance away from your customer, having them understand your ideas, it's a way they can consume that content in a very meaningful way. And then, if it's a large, expensive, and practical model, that's how the old days, they build physical models. And those physical models, when I talk about that, especially on the interior design side, can be a showroom. A lot of people forget showrooms are models. Binders of fabric for different, materials on furniture or carpeting are, in a sense, models. And we can take all of that and digitally convert it and make it portable, right? Expose our customers to that, especially relevant in the age of COVID. And there's kind of the pre-COVID world and the post-COVID world, and I'll be touching on that throughout this presentation. So really, VR enthusiasts like myself have seen VR as kind of the ultimate communication tool. It's kind of the end game for computing. So it really enables your customers, when they have that sort of "I'm not seeing it" point of view. They just put on the headset, look around, and it's natural. The other big one is sense of scale and size. And that's a really, really important part, because that's again one of the hardest things that customers can have a hard time relating to. A lot of people don't know, but in the furniture business, one of their biggest problems is furniture returns. And it's almost always because the person envisions their living room or their dining room or their bedroom bigger than it is. And as interior designers, you probably know this. But it's a very, very important tool for understanding size and scale, because on a one-to-one scale. And then when we talk about creating an emotional connection, the reason why that happens is because it's very connected to agency. So you give your customer their own agency to explore these designs, to explore these spaces. And that gets them very connected to the project on a very much deeper level than a passive viewing or a still image. And we'll talk a bit more about that. VR, as I mentioned before, when we talk about augmenting and improving your existing workflow and tool set, these are some of the areas that where VR can improve those presentation capabilities. Emotional engagement, again, that's having agency, connecting someone to the project, stand in this virtual space, feel how it would be once it's built. There's quite a lot of impact to that. A much deeper understanding, because scale, size, fit, and form, how stuff looks, line of sight is also a big one, and will vary depending on the project and use case. And then just really aligning your customers' expectations to the project. That's another, rework in the construction industry is about 20% of the industry cost. And everybody's experienced customers, once something gets installed, oh, that's not how I thought it would be, and then you have to go back and fix it, or they want to change. So customer satisfaction, aligning their expectations and desires with the design work, and doing that in a very efficient way is key to how VR can help designers. Now, VR is not the ultimate tool in the sense that it always has its use case. I mean, there's going to be times when a quick email, a physical model, even a description or an example shown of a previous build, which is more efficient and just more practical for any given project. But it does have its use cases, and so we wanted to show you a couple of our customers and how they're being used. And this is also going to include a live example at the end here of one of the VR tours that were built for a designer up here in Ontario. So, in the age of COVID, we're seeing any place that had a physical showroom or had some location or thing that had to be shown in person, obviously is very challenging in the age of COVID. So we're seeing a great uptick in showrooms, recreation, virtual galleries. Art galleries are a big one. Retrofitting spaces where it's just absolutely critical to show people a space or show people things where they can't meet in person. And so we've seen a lot of this. We're in the furniture business and doing showrooms. And this is one of our customers. And Lizzie was very excited about VR, and she brought VR into store office environments. And they're a steel case dealer in Raleigh. And they make a great case study because they're able to be efficient now, even pre-COVID, to get their design ideas to their customers, to put the customers virtually into their showrooms in a very natural, easy way, and it saves time, it saves money, and when the customer actually comes to the showroom, they already know what they really want to look at most. So there's some efficiency there. They also cut down on the back and forths because there's a much greater engagement and visual representation of the design work. So there's a lot less questions. What's great about VR is that normally what happens in the design process and the design presentation process is and this will include Lizzie, they go and they send some information to the customer to be looked at, whether it's a still image or maybe a screenshot or an animation, and then they come back with a number of questions. Well, what about this? What about that? And then they go back to the customer with those answers, and then they repeat the process. Everybody's been through that. But what's great about VR, and I always like to stress this when it comes to VR, is that when you give someone a VR experience, even if it's on a 2D screen, but preferably on a VR headset, they're navigating through that space, they're looking all around, they're exerting their agency, and what they're doing at that whole time is they're asking questions, but they're answering them themselves. So a lot of those questions they answer themselves instead of just asking the designer and waiting for them to get answers. So that's really where that efficiency comes from. So furniture, showrooms, retail spaces, art galleries, we're seeing a huge uptick, and store just happens to be one of them that's been really, they had already engaged with VR, but now obviously with COVID, it's really made a difference. We also have worked with Diamond Schmidt, and they were an early adopter for VR, an early customer of Yulio's. And for their use case, the biggest challenge they had, this is a public space, this is in Toronto, it's a museum of science and innovation, and it's just an enormous scale in terms of the building size. You can see it there in the image, and that sort of that stairwell there, very much a fit, size, and scale as the design went on and had to get approved. And to get that feel, to get that input from their stakeholders, VR was just a natural fit. Take the design work into VR. So what they did, what Diamond Smith did, is they took a bunch of different, sort of important architectural points of views. They rendered those out. They brought them all into Yulio, and then they created hotspots within Yulio to have a navigation or narrative. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's the other thing about VR. So we're not just throwing someone in the data or into the scene and saying, "Hey, do what you want." What we really want to do, and in a perfect world with the right tools, is we want to create a narrative. We want to highlight. There's really two aspects to the business problems that we're solving with VR. We're either highlighting like a laser the value the designer brings to the project and the design company, or we want to solve a challenge. And some people call them problems. I like to call them challenges. But that's, there's a challenge, customer doesn't like something, we need to resolve that. Or there's a challenge internally with the design team and they need to resolve that. One interesting thing about Diamond Smith is originally they had thought of VR, and lots of design companies do think about it this way, and we're headed in this direction, that they would use VR just internally to optimize their workflow and their design team's review. And they found it actually to be quite much more of a benefit, at least initially, just engaging with their stakeholders, with the public, with the owners of the project. And it's sort of interesting that we're seeing that. But we do, as the tools evolve and as the power of the machines get better, we're going to see more and more design work inside of VR. So, really the role of virtual reality, as I said, is highlight value like a laser, to solve problems, and really to do that in a way with a very strong narrative. And that's what when we say stories here, we're talking about the narrative. We want to make sure that the narrative is driving home those key points of value. We don't really, and I think, it's one thing to be careful of, and one thing I know that people are weary of is technology getting in the way. That the technology becomes the focus point. Oh, it's exciting, it's VR, and not the project. And so we really have to just be aware of that and stay focused on the value or the challenge. So I mentioned VR headsets. First one, 1968, the Sword of Damocles. Well, in just about 5 years time, last 5 years, we've had the consumer headset. It was really originally created by Palmer Luckey at Oculus in his garage. He was a 19-year-old kid. It got bought by Facebook for a couple billion. I don't think he even finished college. And then we were off to the races. We've been in this iterative cycle. It's been very quick. Things are getting more refined. But really, the key tenets of that needed to be solved for VR to work got solved about 5 years ago. And so here we are now. So there's really, just remember, there's AR and VR. So there's AR headsets and VR headsets. AR headset example would be Microsoft's HoloLens. VR headset would be an Oculus Go, an Oculus Quest, or HTC Vive, which is a tethered headset, or an Oculus Rift. We're going to stay focused on VR here during this presentation. So when you look at virtual reality headsets, there's really two categories: tethered and untethered. And initially, tethered was kind of made the big splash, but untethered now has become almost more important. And the reason why is tethered VR is great. It's typically attached to a high-powered workstation, and it allows for full 6 degrees of freedom and high-powered graphics because we're attached to a workstation. So the challenges with it, though, is that you have to have your workstation. You have to bring someone to that location. You have to bring someone into a VR station at headquarters or at your office, which is fine and has worked well. But what's really been innovative and really exciting about in the VR community is these untethered headsets. And the Oculus Go here that you see pictured on the right is $150 retail US. It's extremely high quality build. It is a very good optics and very high quality imagery. It's only a 3 degrees of freedom device. They now have a 6 degrees of freedom device, meaning that you can lean in and you've got two controllers called the Oculus Quest, and Yulio will be supporting that very shortly. We highly recommend these headsets. You don't even need them to get started. Like I said, you can use really any device to do VR, including web-based VR, which we're going to show here very shortly. But these are great devices to get working with. Within a year, by the time, another 6 months, a year and a half, we're going to be way ahead of where we are now. But it's important to get a feel for what these headsets can do. It's a very experiential medium. You need to put it on. Your customers need to put it on. And I'll talk a little bit about how we use these with the Yulio experience in conjunction shortly. So again, that's Oculus Go. It's when this slide was done up, $300. Now it's 150, maybe 200 Canadian. May change here with the Canadian dollar sliding. The big one, though, we're seeing now, especially post-COVID, is fish tank viewing. That's what we call it here at Yulio. This is the ability to kind of look around and navigate within a web browser. And really, that's key. Everyone's got a web browser. Every device has a web browser. We support all devices, phones, cell phones, iPads, tablets, Windows, iOS, and Mac. About 80% of our customer base uses just a web-based fish tank view. And we're going to show a live example of this with our collaboration mode, or Yulio collaboration mode, shortly. But we just want, like I said, a two-dimensional screen, preferably oversized. That's enough to get you started with immersive visualization. Typically, the scenario has been, up until COVID, you bring your experience into Yulio, and I'll talk a little bit about the software, up on the big screen. You talk about the design, you navigate through the space, the design. At any given point, you hand your customer the Oculus Go and you say, take a look around, tell me what you think. So it's really, what's great about the headset, because mobile and easy to use, you just hold it up to your face. We take the head straps off, in our company, and I recommend it to others. And then it's really just a great way to augment and place that customer in that space, as we've been talking about. VR software. I mean, we're a virtual reality platform. Of course, I'm a bit biased. We have a very simple, low friction approach to VR. We work within existing workflows and existing tools, but there's lots of products out there, and we're Yulio's focused on mobile VR and VR access through any device. Tethered's a different thing. We kind of work hand in hand. Tethered's great, full 6 degrees of freedom is great, high-powered graphics are great, but it's very, especially now with COVID, very difficult to get your customers into those workstations and into those VR stations. So mobile VR, take it on the go, click in a web browser. That's what Yulio's focused on. All of our efforts really get the message out about the power of VR. And then we magnify and augment those tethered initiatives. So anybody has any tethered initiatives, don't feel like there's a competing factor between the two. They actually go hand in hand. So typically what you do with software is you're going to author it. You're going to render out 360 degree point of views. We call them cube maps sometimes. You're going to bring those together. You're going to build a narrative, and that's key. You don't want to just view VR. You want to have a narrative. You want to focus on value. You want to focus on the challenges. Once that whole experience is created, we can share it. We can share it in a VR headset. We can share it on a screen. We can get into a collaboration session, or we can just singularly view it and share it as a link. So typically the workflow is CAD rendering or photography is what we use in Yulio, what VR, at least mobile VR, typically uses. Most of the CAD tools and rendering tools work. I have a list of about 30 of them. So if anybody has any questions about what CAD tools work or don't work, or what I'd recommend, feel free to reach out to me. Or if you use something and you say, hey, what about this? I'm happy. Right now, our core audience uses either our Jump rendering tool, Enscape 3D, Lumion, Corona, Revit 360 rendering service, or I always want to stress this, a 360 degree photography camera. They're very inexpensive these days. For $1,000, you can get a commercial grade one, less for just one to experiment with. They're great for documenting projects as they go in. And then once the final project is in, go documentate it and capture it. Great for portfolio pages, great for reference for new employees, and that sort of thing. So primarily around mobile VR, you're looking at rendering, 3D CAD rendering, and or 360 photography, or even doing presentations with a mix of both. So that's going to be your source material. Primarily around these experiences, when you're presenting them to clients, you'll be either working remotely or in person. The remotely side is greatly magnified. I should have made the in-person one a very tiny little cube in the very center, on the right side. We're probably not going to see. One thing I like to mention just about COVID is that be prepared. Everybody's happy that restrictions are loosening, but from all the experts, at any time we could be locked back down again. So I think it's another critical element of why adopting VR now and adopting remote presentation and collaboration is not optional anymore. It used to be more optional. Now it's a requirement. So when you're working remotely, you can send these experiences. If they have a headset themselves, they can load the experience, or you can push them with our platform. You can push the experience to their headset, or you can just work in a browser. Typically in person, the way that typically happens, as I mentioned before, you're in a boardroom, you're in a big oversized screen, or you're meeting a cafe with your customer. You review with Yulio web fish tank view. You review the project, walk them through it, and at given locations or given moments, you say, here's the headset, take a look. And they pull it up their head, look around, kind of stand in that space. What's great about that too is our collaborative session will actually show what they're seeing in the headset up on the big screen. So if you have a group of people in a boardroom or something, that can be quite handy. I'll try not to more cognizant of the time here. And then lastly, when the project's complete, you can either embed it into a website, which is great because you don't leave the website to have the Yulio experience. Great for products, great for real estate and others, portfolio pages. We have ability to do social sharing with a click of a button through Yulio, but really you can now social media and social marketing is so important. Yulio has a text-based, you just type in someone's phone number and it sends it. And then we have the collaboration session, which is very, very important way to show off your designs collaboratively, either over long distance. So now I think it's probably a good time to jump into the live example. Marilia Ebert, she may be on the call, I'm not sure. She designed this in SketchUp. It's been rendered in Yulio cloud-based rendering a tool called Jump. It's a plugin for SketchUp, and then it's been assembled into a narrative inside of Yulio. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch a collaborative collaborative session, and I'm going to send a link to the webinars chat group, and you can just click that and go. So give me 2 seconds here. Just going to stop screen share. Hold on, let me just do this first. So when you're in a project, you just go to this little collaborate button, click that. And then what happens is it starts a session, it shows me as the first user. And then what happens is anybody goes to live.yulio.com and then types their name and this 4-digit code, it will automatically connect you to the session. But what you can do is you can actually put the code into the link, which I'm going to post this in the chat group, and then you can join. So if you want to join in at that link there, I'm going to stop screen sharing. Actually, I'll keep my screen share up too. So feel free to click into that link. So this is the this is the Yulio VR experience. What happens is you click and drag to look around. You can kind of zoom in with your mouse wheel. Uh, but what's great about collaborative mode is that we always give the users agency. I'm the host. I kind of control where we travel to. But while people are in this collaboration session, they get to look around freely. We can have a discussion about any given architectural or interior design features. I have the ability to focus everybody's attention with the spotlight on the chair, as you see here, not everybody's view, but we immediately give agency back to the other users. We always want them to look around, feel connected, feel like they're immersed in the scene. The other nice thing about collaboration session versus screen share is that it's high frame rate. It's a high quality, high frame rate experience. This also works with the VR headset if it's tethered to the user account. You just hold the heads. You just launch the Oculus Yulio viewer app, and it'll immediately see this session and connect. So while I'm looking around here, these are travel nodes. We can travel to different areas. We can have a discussion around this dining and kitchen area. You can see here, we can look around. Maybe we don't like this mirror or something. We can mark up the scene. I can direct view to it, and then I can also give view to others. I can give someone else control and let them navigate around. The other neat thing too is that with Yulio, we have the ability to embed images and links and audio and text. So you can see here, the sectional couch has a hotspot, and there's a little sort of pop up, and I can see a photo of the sectional. And then what's even great, and I've had interior designers request this, is the ability to link to external sources. So if you want, you can go to an external source link, and then you got all these sectionals on Wayfair, for example. That could be a PDF, could be a movie playing in YouTube, or really anything. And then it's just click back to your tab, your original tab here, to go back to the scene. So this is Yulio. I'm happy to send anybody examples of this. We do have a VR showcases page. We have examples of the embedded experience here. We also have a bunch of examples. Halfway down the page, I'll just let you know there's a school system here, a little different formatting with an embed. And then one other one that I think is really neat to look at, especially if you're going to do some photo 360, is this, let me just see here, where is it? This Mount Toomley tiny house. You click that, it's got a mix of photo 360 and CAD. So I want to thank Marilia for letting us show this. I can take any questions now if anybody has any questions. What I'll do is I'll put up my email here once again. Hold on a sec. There we go. There we go. Well, I appreciate everybody coming. I appreciate your time. And again, I have an open line here. There's my my email and my phone. More than happy to take questions. You know, obviously we'd love to see you try Yulio. We do have a 30-day free trial. It's a quick sign up, no credit card. Get you started with VR. Like the barrier of entry now for starting and playing with VR is extremely low. Our trial and $150 will get you moving if you want to do full VR with a VR headset. If not, you just sign up for our trial and then experiment there. More than happy to help with guidance on hardware and guidance on file formats and building these scenes. And appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you more. Have a wonderful day.